You've destroyed our family name long enough, my sister Jessica declared to the packed courtroom, her voice dripping with manufactured sorrow. Our parents sat behind her nodding solemnly, Dad's arms crossed in judgment while Mom clutched a tissue she hadn't actually used. I stood at the defense table in silence, watching their lawyer present the fraudulent bankruptcy petition, counting down the seconds until everything they assumed would shatter into pieces. But why did Judge Thomas Bradford suddenly stop mid-signature, his pen hovering over the documents, his expression shifting from routine boredom to sharp attention? Counsel, approach immediately. Both attorneys moved forward. The judge's voice dropped to a tense whisper that barely carried to where I stood. Is this the same Aurora BioTech that was just profiled in Forbes for securing the $96 million pharmaceutical partnership? The one that's developing breakthrough cancer treatment protocols? Jessica's attorney stammered something inaudible. Judge Bradford looked up, his eyes locking onto mine with a mixture of surprise and dawning suspicion. I'm going to need extensive verification before proceeding here because either this filing is spectacularly incompetent or someone is attempting to perpetrate fraud in my courtroom. My sister's confident smirk began to falter. I founded Aurora BioTech 9 years ago in a rented lab space with $5,000 and a hypothesis everyone said was impossible. The Sterling family didn't do impossible. We did tradition. My father, Richard Sterling, ran a prestigious medical practice that had been in the family for 3 generations. My sister Jessica had followed in his footsteps, becoming a dermatologist with a lucrative practice in Manhattan. My younger brother Marcus had gone into pharmaceutical sales, leveraging the family name to secure high commission positions. And I, Cassandra, the middle child, the black sheep, had abandoned my medical school acceptance to pursue what my father called playing scientist. Biotech research. He'd scoffed when I explained my plans. That's not a career, Cassandra. That's a gamble. Finish medical school, join the practice, build something stable. The cancer treatment protocols I'm developing could save thousands of lives. You're 26 years old. You don't have the experience to lead groundbreaking research. You'll burn through your money and come back expecting us to fix your mess. I won't let that happen. I won't fail. Everyone thinks that until they do, you will. I'd walked out of his office that day and never asked for their approval again. The first 6 years were ruthless. I lived in a studio apartment that doubled as my home office, survived on grant money and ramen, worked 100-hour weeks, and learned every brutal lesson about biotech entrepreneurship through expensive mistakes, failed experiments, investor pitches that went nowhere, a patent dispute that nearly bankrupted me in year 3. My family observed from their comfortable distance, waiting for the inevitable collapse they'd predicted. Still playing with test tubes, Jessica would ask at family gatherings, her tone sweetly condescending. How's your little experiment going? Dad would add with barely concealed disdain. We worry about you, sweetheart, Mom would say, which really meant we're embarrassed by your choices. I stopped attending family events after year 4. The energy I wasted defending myself could be better spent advancing my research. And advance it I did. Aurora BioTech developed a revolutionary approach to targeted cancer therapy, using modified proteins to attack tumor cells while leaving healthy tissue untouched. The technology that could potentially transform oncology treatment. We secured our first clinical trial approval in year 5, our second major research grant in year 6. By year 8, we had 32 employees, $14 million in annual revenue, and recognition as one of the most promising biotech startups in the Northeast. The $96 million partnership came through 7 weeks ago, a multi-year agreement with Global Med Pharmaceuticals to develop and commercialize our cancer treatment protocols. The deal that would transform Aurora from a promising startup into a major pharmaceutical research company. Forbes ran a feature story. Medical journals requested interviews. Venture capital firms suddenly wanted meetings. My family had no idea. I deliberately maintained a low profile, using my married name Cassandra Moore for all public appearances and publications. The few distant relatives who'd stumbled across news about Aurora BioTech didn't connect Seymour, PhD, CEO with the daughter they'd written off as a failure. I preferred their ignorance. I didn't need their validation anymore. But apparently, I still had to deal with their sabotage. The bankruptcy petition landed on my desk 4 weeks after the partnership announcement, filed by Jessica, claiming that Aurora BioTech owed her $350,000 from a loan she'd made in year 2. The petition alleged that I'd defaulted on repayment terms, that the company was financially insolvent, and that creditors required court protection to recover their investments. Every single word was fiction. Jessica had never loaned me anything. She'd never shown interest in Aurora beyond dismissive mockery. The documentation attached to the petition was fabricated wholesale, loan agreements I'd never signed, promissory notes bearing forged signatures, financial statements that bore no resemblance to our actual books. It was fraud, calculated and deliberate. The kind of fraud designed to cripple a company even if ultimately disproven, freezing assets in bankruptcy proceedings, terrifying investors, jeopardizing pharmaceutical partnerships that required demonstrated financial stability. I called my attorney within minutes. "They're attempting to force you into bankruptcy with manufactured documentation," Rachel said after reviewing the filing. "It's astonishingly reckless. Any forensic examination will expose the fraud immediately. But the filing itself creates complications that could delay your global med partnership implementation." Exactly. Jessica knows I have something significant happening. She wants to sabotage it before it goes further. How would she know about the partnership? My mother's neighbor's daughter works in pharmaceutical compliance. She probably saw something in regulatory filings and mentioned it at a family dinner. I exhaled slowly. They don't understand the scale of what I've built. They just know I've secured a major partnership and decided to interfere. Why would your own family want to destroy your success? Because my success proves they were completely wrong about me. Some people cannot tolerate that reality. The court date arrived on a Tuesday morning. I dressed in my standard professional attire, expensive but understated, authoritative without being aggressive. My lawyer, Rachel Kim, met me at the defendant's table with 4 boxes of documentation proving Aurora's actual financial position. Jessica arrived with our parents, staging an entrance calculated for maximum dramatic impact. She wore designer business attire that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Mom had dressed in somber colors as though attending a wake for family honor. Dad carried himself with the righteous indignation of a man whose expertise had been disrespected. They didn't acknowledge my presence. Not a glance, not a word. I was the problem requiring correction, not a family member deserving recognition. "About time someone held her accountable," Jessica told her attorney, loud enough for me to hear. "This should have happened years ago." The gallery held the usual courtroom observers, a few journalists covering bankruptcy proceedings, people waiting for subsequent cases. None of them knew they were about to witness a spectacular implosion. Judge Bradford entered, and I'd researched him thoroughly. 28 years on the bench, reputation for meticulous analysis, absolute intolerance for courtroom misconduct. If anyone would immediately recognize Vincent's fraud, it was him. The proceedings opened with Jessica's attorney presenting the petition. "Your Honor, the defendant has systematically avoided repayment of a substantial family loan, instead channeling funds into an unprofitable venture that has never demonstrated sustainable financial viability." Judge Bradford raised his hand, interrupting. "The company name, Aurora BioTech, based in Cambridge, Massachusetts?" "Yes, Your Honor." He pulled something up on his computer, typed briefly, and went completely still. That's when he summoned both attorneys to the bench. The whispered conference lasted several minutes. I watched Jessica's confidence drain in real time. Her lawyer's complexion had gone ashen. My father leaned forward, straining to hear, his expression shifting from smug certainty to concerned confusion. Finally, Judge Bradford spoke loud enough for the entire courtroom. "We're going to recess for 45 minutes. During that time, I expect both parties to prepare comprehensive documentation of their positions." He fixed Jessica's lawyer with a stare that could freeze water. "Counsel for the petitioner, I strongly recommend you verify every document you've submitted, because if I discover fraudulent filings in my courtroom, the consequences will be extremely severe." The gavel came down with finality. Jessica practically rushed to her lawyer's side, her voice rising with panic. "What's happening? What did he say to you?" "I used the recess to organize our documentation." Rachel systematically arranged the evidence across our table. Actual financial statements showing $14 million in revenue and substantial cash reserves. The Global Med Partnership Agreement, redacted for confidentiality but clearly authentic. Letters from venture capital firms confirming investment interest. Tax returns, independent audit reports, 9 years of legitimate business records. And then the forensic analysis of Jessica's petition. Document examination experts had reviewed her loan agreements and determined they'd been created 8 days ago. Digital metadata exposed the fraud unequivocally. The signatures were amateurish forgeries. The financial figures were pure invention. 45 minutes later, Judge Bradford returned. "I've conducted preliminary research during the recess," he announced. "Aurora BioTech is not a failing company. It appears to be a highly successful pharmaceutical research firm that recently secured one of the most significant biotech partnerships of the current quarter." He looked directly at Jessica's lawyer. "Would you care to explain why you filed a bankruptcy petition against a company with no apparent financial distress?" The lawyer shuffled papers with trembling hands. "Your Honor, my client provided documentation of an outstanding debt. Documentation that, even upon cursory examination, appears grossly inconsistent with the company's public profile and industry recognition." Judge Bradford turned to me. "Dr. Moore, or should I say Dr. Sterling, since the petitioner appears to be your sister, would you like to respond to these allegations?" I stood calmly. "Your Honor, there is no debt. There was no loan. Every document submitted by the petitioner is fraudulent. My sister has never been involved with Aurora BioTech in any capacity whatsoever. She's filing this petition to sabotage my company because my success contradicts the narrative she's preferred to believe. That's an extremely serious accusation. I have extremely serious evidence." I nodded to Rachel, who began distributing copies of our documentation. "These are our actual financial records, prepared by certified public accountants and verified through independent audits. This is the forensic analysis of documents submitted by the petitioner, proving they were created last week using templates inconsistent with legitimate business agreements. And this is a comprehensive timeline of my sister's public statements about my company over the past 9 years, demonstrating a consistent pattern of dismissal and hostility." Jessica shot to her feet, her voice shrill. "This is absurd. She's my sister. I have every right to collect debts she owes the family." "What debts?" I asked, my voice level and controlled. "Name the specific date of this supposed loan. Name the bank account from which funds were allegedly transferred. Provide one single piece of evidence that doesn't immediately disintegrate under examination." She couldn't, because there was nothing. There was only jealousy and resentment dressed up in legal filings. Judge Bradford examined the documentation for 30 minutes. The courtroom remained absolutely silent. Jessica's lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. My parents had abandoned their theatrical performance, replaced by the dawning horror that this wasn't proceeding according to their plan. Finally, the judge spoke. "I've reviewed the materials presented by both parties. The forensic analysis is compelling and conclusive. The metadata definitively shows the petitioner's documentation was created recently, not years ago as claimed. The financial records submitted by the defendant show a company with substantial assets and zero outstanding debt to the petitioner." He turned to Jessica, his expression hard as granite. "Miss Sterling, I'm dismissing this petition with prejudice. But your involvement with this court is far from concluded. Filing a fraudulent bankruptcy petition constitutes federal criminal conduct. I'm referring this matter to the United States Attorney's Office for investigation of potential perjury, fraud, and attempted interference with interstate commerce." Jessica's face drained of all color. "Your Honor, there's been a terrible misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding whatsoever. You submitted forged documents to this court. You claimed debts that don't exist. You attempted to force a successful company into bankruptcy proceedings through deliberate fraud." He removed his reading glasses. "Were you aware that interfering with a pharmaceutical research company currently engaged in federally approved clinical trials can trigger additional federal charges? The government takes a dim view of people who jeopardize critical medical research." "Medical research? It's just my sister's little lab company." "Your sister's little lab company is developing breakthrough cancer treatment protocols currently in phase 2 clinical trials. Sabotaging it isn't merely fraud. It's potentially interfering with critical medical research that could save lives." He turned to me. "Dr. Moore, I apologize that the court's time has been wasted by this frivolous and fraudulent filing. Your company's reputation should suffer no negative consequences from this proceeding, and I'll ensure the record explicitly reflects the fraudulent nature of this petition." "Thank you, Your Honor." Case dismissed with prejudice. The aftermath was immediate chaos. Court officers approached Jessica and her attorney regarding the criminal referral. My parents attempted to exit quietly, but I caught my father's eye as he reached the courtroom doors. His expression was unreadable, perhaps shame, perhaps fury, perhaps simply the inability to process how thoroughly his assumptions had failed. "Mr. and Mrs. Sterling," I kept my voice even and professional. I assume you were aware of this action. Dad turned slowly. Cassandra, this was Jessica's plan. You were sitting in the gallery nodding approval while she attempted to destroy my company. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending innocence. We thought we were helping protect the family. Helping whom? Your daughter commit federal crimes, or yourselves avoid admitting you were wrong about me for 9 years? Mom stepped forward tentatively. We didn't realize it would escalate this far. We thought. Jessica said the company was actually struggling. Jessica said what she wanted to believe. And you believed her because that's easier than admitting you completely misjudged me. I gathered my materials. The $96 million partnership is real. The 32 employees whose livelihoods depend on Aurora, they're real. The cancer treatment protocols we're developing that could save lives, those are real too. You attempted to destroy all of it because my success made you profoundly uncomfortable. Cassandra, please. I'm finished. Whatever happens to Jessica legally is her own consequence. Whatever justifications you tell yourselves are yours to manage. But don't contact me again. Don't pretend we're family. Family doesn't attempt to bankrupt each other with forged documents. I walked out of that courthouse and never looked back. The federal investigation proceeded swiftly. Jessica's attorney, facing potential disbarment, cooperated fully. He revealed that Jessica had approached him with the scheme, claiming Aurora was a failing company that needed to be shut down before it could further embarrass the family name. The attorney had been negligent, accepting his client's assertions without proper verification, but the primary fraud was entirely Jessica's. Federal charges were filed within 7 weeks: bankruptcy fraud, perjury, attempted interference with federally regulated medical research. Jessica faced up to 18 years in federal prison. My father leveraged his medical community connections and substantial financial resources to secure a plea agreement that reduced the sentence to 4 years. Jessica would serve time in a minimum security facility, lose her medical license permanently, and carry a felony conviction for the remainder of her life. Dad's medical practice survived, but barely. The reputational damage of having a daughter convicted of federal fraud made him radioactive to the wealthy patients he'd built his career serving. Last I heard, he'd taken early retirement while younger physicians assumed control of the practice he'd spent 40 years building. Mom sent a letter 8 months after the sentencing. It was filled with justifications and carefully worded non-apologies. We never intended for things to escalate this way. Families should forgive each other's mistakes. Surely you can understand our perspective and concern. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Aurora BioTech celebrated its 10th anniversary last month. We've grown to 214 employees. Our partnership with Global Med has expanded to $420 million over the next 7 years. We've opened a second research facility in San Diego and are planning a third in Boston. Our Phase 2 clinical trials are showing remarkable success rates, and Phase 3 approval is expected within 18 months. Forbes ran a follow-up article titled "The Biotech Company That Survived Family Sabotage." I granted one carefully worded interview about the bankruptcy case, focusing on the legal implications rather than personal drama. The journalist asked why I thought my sister had done it. Some people cannot tolerate being proven wrong, I said. They would rather destroy something successful than admit they fundamentally misjudged it. Do you maintain any relationship with your family now? I have an excellent relationship with the family I've chosen to build. My colleagues, my research partners, my wife, the people who believed in me when I had nothing but a rented lab and a hypothesis. And your biological family? They made their choices. I've made mine. The interview concluded there. Some questions don't require more elaboration than that. Last week, I received an email from my brother Marcus. He'd always been peripheral to the family drama, too focused on his own career to pay much attention to mine. But apparently, the scandal had damaged his standing in pharmaceutical sales. Companies whispered about his sister, the felon, his parents, the enablers. I know you probably don't want to hear from any of us, he wrote. But I wanted you to know I never agreed with how they treated you. I was too afraid to speak up, but I always believed you'd prove them wrong. It was a half apology weighted with self-interest. He wanted to distance himself from the family catastrophe, to position himself as the brother who'd secretly supported me all along. I responded with a single sentence. Support offered in silence when it would have mattered is simply complicity with extra steps. But thank you for reaching out. I meant it without forgiveness. I didn't forgive him, but I acknowledged the gesture. Growth must begin somewhere. My son was born 4 months ago. His name is Theodore, after my late grandmother, the only sterling who ever truly believed in me. She died before Aurora became what it is, but she told me on her deathbed that she knew I would succeed. I hold Theodore in the nursery we designed in our home, a home I purchased with money I earned, in a neighborhood I selected far from the family that attempted to destroy me. I tell him stories about perseverance and innovation, about building things that matter, about the fundamental difference between people who elevate you and people who require your failure. Your grandparents, my parents, they won't be part of your life, I told him last night, even though he's too young to comprehend. That's not punishment, it's protection. You deserve to be surrounded by people who recognize your potential, not people who need you to fail to feel validated. He looked at me with those unfocused newborn eyes. You're going to accomplish extraordinary things, Theodore, and when you do, I'm going to be your fiercest advocate and biggest champion. That's what family means, not shared genetics, shared belief and support. I placed him in his crib and watched him sleep, this tiny person who will never know the family that rejected his mother. He'll know the family that chose her instead. That's sufficient. That's more than sufficient. They dragged me into bankruptcy court expecting to finally prove I was the failure they'd always insisted I would be. Instead, they proved themselves frauds, both literally and figuratively. The judge recognized my company's name because we'd built something worth recognizing, worth protecting, worth celebrating. They thought they were shutting down an embarrassment. They were attempting to destroy a $96 million success story developing breakthrough medical treatments. The courtroom wasn't their moment of vindication, it was their complete exposure. And now, while Jessica serves her sentence and my parents fade into irrelevance, Aurora BioTech continues expanding, continues researching, continues proving that the only force more powerful than family doubt is unwavering personal determination. Keep building, keep proving that success is the most elegant response to those who bet against you.